You're listening to Wanna Coffee with Kai Alicia.
And Adriana.
Talking
Random.
sensible
Shit.
I cannot believe the sudden passing, or at least sudden to what we know, of Chadwick, but the passing of Chadwick Boseman. His effect on so many people, the industry, Marvel, Black representation, all the while he had colon cancer for 4 years.
Definitely no one saw it coming because he hit it so well. And I don't think it, and this point I think is why everyone is so, impressed about that. I don't think he hit it because, paparazzi and drama or anything, but it looks like he really didn't want to be defined by that.
Yeah.
He knew that something might happen, like ultimately, but he really, and that's so admirable, that he really wanted to do so many things before the last thing were to happen, and he did it. So for me, that's the most shocking part. I mean, he was an artist, he was in Hollywood, he was world famous, but for me, that is the most remarkable part, that he had a mission to accomplish, and I think he made it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. His legacy. Yeah. Lots of, I guess, I don't know what you would call that, but maybe fortitude of strength, fortitude of character, integrity of character. He just seemed to unlock so many parts of himself and transcend these roles while being sick. It's just they talk about him doing stunts for all of his roles, especially during the Marvel, the Black Panther role, and how he would be in freezing cold water, and he did his stunts for the role.
Wow.
You know what I mean? It's what the fuck? I would be telling everyone I was sick. Yeah. I'd be I'm sick. I can't do that.
Yeah, definitely. That is the thing, what defines you in the face of death? Because he could have easily said, yeah, I'm sick, I'm not doing this, or say, these are the last years of my life, maybe, and I'll decide to, rest, retire, have some leisure. But no, he decided to work and to do what he has, really meaningful characters that he played,
Thurgood Marshall.
Yes.
Jackie Robinson.
Black Panther. It's so meaningful for little kids. He was their idol. So you cannot help to wonder, what will you do if you were in that situation? And that is something that I think this news have maybe, a trigger to ask us. You have to ask yourself, what would I do? What would I do? And honestly, I don't know what will I do. You try to think that you will pull through it, but emotionally, psychologically, physically, your body will react in so many different ways. And the way he did it, or the way he fought through that, was amazing.
Mm-hmm. It's reminding me a little too about our previous discussion of mind over matter.
Yes.
He definitely has some incredible capabilities to be able to just kind of what it seems like is lock in and just decide he's got this mission and just don't let anything stop him. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think about like being just sick anyway, and I think about, like, as an example, my husband being sick. I laugh about it recently because, like, he came home one day and he's like, "Oh, I'm not feeling good," and he's moping around and he's having one of his tennis days, and I'm like, "Do you think you have the coronavirus?" He's like, "I do, I do," and it's like 2 days of him just like, "I've got the coronavirus. I've got the coronavirus.
This is it.
I've got to stay inside." I was like, and I'm feeling his temperature, and I'm like, "You don't have a temperature. You don't have a temperature." He thinks he's got a temperature. He thinks he's sweating, and he decides to go get a thermometer. And as soon as the thermometer comes and he tests himself, he's like, "Oh, I don't have a temperature." And I was like, and all of a sudden, change for the rest of the day. Happy, seemingly normal. And I just said, what if that was a placebo? You know what I mean? Like, what if that thing didn't even work? Would you feel better? Like, did you really think you had that? And he's like, "I really thought I had it." But I think what I saw was that it just completely took over him. It just took over him, where he succumbed to what he thought was his own the nocebo effect.
Yes, exactly.
Where he really thought he had a sickness, and that's all he could think about. That's all he could talk about. And he was physically acting. Here's someone who actually is fighting for his life, and yet doesn't tell us. I don't know, maybe he did tell some people, because I don't know how you would be able to.
No, you have to, like, go to chemo maybe, or
I don't know.
Go to the doctor, but maybe it was
his family, maybe.
Yeah, but and being so young, that's the other thing. He was so young.
43, yeah.
Like, almost our age.
Mm-hmm.
And you think, like, what would you do? But that happens, like, it takes some, like, a special character and personality to say, hey, this is not what is going to define me. And you have to think, if you want to keep fighting up until the day you're gone, or you're just going to, relax. I've seen so many people that they have terminal diseases and they just pull through. Like, this is it. I have a really close relative, and that person was happy until the last day. He was a person that never lost hope on themselves. Like, it was like a personal battle. Like, say, okay, maybe this is my pride, this is my ego, but this thing is not going to define me. So I'm going to be acting as if nothing has happened. This is a personal attack on me. I'm going to be happy. I'm cool. Nothing to see here. And I'm just going to behave the way that I usually do. And that was amazing, because that same the same attitude keep him alive, even for a longer time
than expected.
Exactly. Instead, like, who knows that if he will have get depressed, or if he will have get really sad, he wouldn't have last for that long. So I think that think about mortality sometimes is maybe you don't have to think about it in a really pessimistic way, but in the same time you have to think, like, okay, and we don't know, like our days are counted, maybe 20, 30, 50 years, or maybe tomorrow. So you have to think about it and say, what do I want to do? Like, think in a really bit positive way, like, okay, this is like a setup of things that are my priorities, and what can I do to honor my life and my legacy.
Or myself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Wow, it's kind of leaving me sort of speechless at the moment, this idea that maybe death isn't something to be feared. Like the end of life isn't something actually to be feared. It's just the end of a particular cycle. And also, too, when you're talking about the person who said, okay, I'm not going to let this define me and whatever, I'm just going to function as normal, they basically took their power back. Because what you do is you relinquish power, and you tell this, this doctor tells you, well, based on what I know and the schooling that I've taken and your test results and all this stuff, you have this, and this is your life expectancy. And who is that person?
Yeah.
Who are they? And who are they in terms of bearing on your life?
Exactly. And it's like that person, and I'm sure like anyone who knows someone that had a chronic disease, would be like, they were like, no, I'm good, I'm fine, I'm cool. And then this illness comes and like, no, you have to, you're sick, you're weak, I'm breaking you down. And that person is just comes back, and then it's a constant battle. At the same time, it's like you say, taking back their power on their lives. They I think they're aware that it's going to be like a really big fight that probably you're not going to be successful at it. But at the same time, you have your power back. You say, hey, this is me.
This is my life.
This is my life, exactly.
This is mine. It's not his or theirs. It's mine.
Yeah, because at the end of time, like if you think about death, it's heartbreaking, but we think it's heartbreaking
because it's all we know.
Yeah, and also because you think about the family and the relatives, and this kid is going to be orphan, and this mom is going to be childless, and all. But if you think particular on the person that is dying, then you think like, okay, really bad that suddenly, obviously I wouldn't like it for that to happen to me, but obviously your life has been cut short, or your life, like, it was meant to stop here. But then what you're going to do about it? You get your affairs in order and say, okay, I'm going to live like this, like that, because this is the time to think about me and what am I going to do and what will be my legacy. So I think if you see mortality like that, you can think about the power you have on your life.
Yeah. I think we've kind of made death seem like as a society, as a culture, because we know so little about it, we know so little about like what happens after death, we're so frightened about it, which is why I love that, like, what is it called? I think it's called La Muerta. Is that what it's called? In Mexico, the celebration of death, which I really like and I'm really fascinated by, because there's something so empowering about not being afraid of it and not treating it like this, like, ooh, it's so spooky, death and spirits and this whole other idea. And that also, I feel like, has something to do with taking back your power and realizing that it's just something that is just a part of life and something you have to accept, which isn't so bad once you accept it.
Yeah, that's right.
So maybe, sounds like someone like Chadwick, as young as he is, was obviously wise beyond his years and realized that once he accepts who and what he is, who's to define who and what he is?
Only him.
Only him. And when he dies is when he dies. Not when a doctor says or just, determines. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Or because you're given a diagnosis, what does that actually mean though? Like, it just reminds me so much of the person that you talk about who was given this diagnosis and lived well past the time that her doctor assumed she would live. It's like, what is that diagnosis? Who are you? Yeah. And the interesting thing too, I think about him was I was just taking a look at all the characters he played and watching some of those interviews he's had and seeing him talk about just some of the things he's experienced, or just watching him talk about the things he's experienced. He looks so wise.
Yes.
He looks so lived in. He looks so experienced. And I'm not sure if I'm just thinking that because maybe he was sick during those times or whatever. And so sometimes that ages you, But there's something about the way he spoke and the way he held himself that looked like he had so much knowledge to impart.
Yes.
And so much like authority about it,
That's true. But do you also notice that he looked happy? He didn't look bitter or tired. He just looked like content.
Yeah.
Like wise and happy.
Mm-hmm.
Like he had like this peaceful smile. You would look at him and it's like, oh.
Mm-hmm.
He inspired all that peace. Because that is the face that I think he
Yeah.
had.
Yeah, I think it's hard not to sort of in this way not idolize him.
Yeah.
He has the whole like Patrick Swayze, Patrick Swayze had that same sort of thing. I'm not talking about their personalities. I mean sort of like not having told anyone that they were battling the sickness, and then all of a sudden we know that they would battle it, and then they, and it was such a like sad story, but somehow, not to compare the two, but there is something interesting about these, these people sort of facing their mortality and still doing what they love despite it. I think that there are that's a lot of control.
Yes.
It's a lot of self-control, self-composure.
Self-soothing, like, it would be human, like, if you get a news like that, you're being reminded by your mind, like, hey, do you remember that?
You're dying.
You're dying? Like, come on.
But it's relative too, right? Do you remember that you're dying? Isn't everyone dying every day?
Like, yeah.
We're all dying.
These people, they will say, like, yeah, fuck that.
So it's like, compared to what? And I'm sure he there's this other interview with Chadwick where he talks about visiting these kids in this cancer unit. Oh, okay. And he talks about how like important that was for him to be seeing this and everything. And it's like, I'm sure he was thinking, but this isn't even me. Like I can do these things and look, you know what I mean? So again, it's like relative compared to what everybody's dying, So I was reading about archetypes. Have you ever heard about archetypes, soul archetypes?
Oh, no.
By Carl Jung. He basically like studied alongside Freud. Mm-hmm. And everyone kind of like idolized Freud, and then he kind of went off in his own thing. And he's sort of like this mystical psychiatrist. I call him mystical because like he believes in the subconscious and the unconscious reality of things and the workings behind that, rather than what Freud was, which was like very practical and very like,
this is this and that is that. And
yes. And the Myers-Briggs test. Mm-hmm. It was, so the people who invented that test, the Myers-Briggs, whoever it was, I think it was a mother and a daughter, sorry, I think, can't remember.
Yeah, I think it was mother and daughter.
Okay, yeah. And they got their teachings from Carl Jung. And based on what it was called the collective unconscious. And they wanted to present it to a wider audience in a more palatable way, and they came up with these personality types, which are used in corporate. Mm-hmm. But there's another sort of like really froofy side to this, called the 22 Soul Archetypes, which everybody, I guess, has 6 main archetypes in them. And I've been studying, and I finally like finished my, this whole thing about it. And I've been studying my archetypes, and they're so cool. And anyway, one of my archetypes has to do with death. And
oh wow, that's
so crazy, right?
Yeah.
So it's so weird. We're talking about it right now, and it's people who are afraid of either death, which I'm afraid of, feel like they've got something that they need to accomplish, and they also feel it's part of their soul mission to like consistently transform, which is like fucking nuts. So like,
but it makes sense at the same time.
It does.
You're like, what? Like, yeah,
it does. So now talking about what I think about death and seeing the death of Chadwick Boseman, and looking at how he embraced death and still was able to transform in all these characters, and in his life, it's like he accepted death. He accepted transformation. Being able to talk about this right now is really interesting because I've had such a limited perspective, almost like, because I'm a spiritual person, religious person. I don't know exactly what death looks like. And there are so many people like Chadwick who have embraced it and accepted it to a degree, as much as any human being can, I think. And said, it doesn't define me. This isn't how This isn't me. This is just something.
Finish. Yeah, this is not how it ends.
Which is like fucking nuts. Because you think it ends, right? And you're like,
this is it. Yeah, you freeze. I think I will receive a news, like this type of news on my life, and like, hey, this is going to happen. I will freeze. I will be so scared. Like, I will be so anxious and scared. It's like, what's going on? Why me? It will be so difficult to, canalize that and make something productive out of it.
Yeah.
Which you did.
It would. I think it is for most people. I think that's the human experience.
Yeah, and he's so remarkable.
Yes.
Because he did. He went about being human.
Thanks for listening. We want to know what you think.
Send us your comments and follow us on Twitter and Facebook
at #WannaCoffeePod.